Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri. And we're going to be switching gears now to, I think, an interesting story. In recent news, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been forced to take an extended flight route to the United States to avoid airspace over countries likely to enforce an arrest warrant issued by the International Criminal Court, the ICC. This warrant of arrest issued in November 2024. I think we were all really excited and glad that that was issued, accuses Netanyahu and former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant of war crimes related to the ongoing genocide in Gaza. And to avoid jurisdictions that are signatories of the Rome Statute, Netanyahu's flight path diverted over Greece, Italy, and France instead of countries like Ireland, Iceland, and the Netherlands, where the warrant may be enforced if he had to make any emergency landing. His visit to Washington has already sparked protests with demonstrators in the capital criticizing his presence and calling for attention to the ICC's decision. And we'll be discussing the implications of this situation and just the broader political context. And we'll be joined by Dr. Anas Takriti, the CEO of Cordoba Foundation, a UK-based research and advisory group committed to bridging the gap of understanding between the Muslim world and the West through its research initiatives. Doc, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you giving us your time this morning, and looking forward to a really interesting conversation.
First of all, good morning. Second of all, what we're seeing is quite an unprecedented, and that is the collapse of international order and international law. After all, I mean, the ICC is the highest court in the entire world, established by countries such as the United States, as well as the United Kingdom and the others, who proclaim or claim continuously that they are the bastions of democracy, international law, and it is at their hands, those very countries right now, that international law, being dismantled bit by bit. And for what? I mean, and this is so bizarre, in order to protect a war criminal. Of course, the ICC and the ICJ have yet to deliver a verdict, but I think that it's now a settled argument and a settled debate in the eyes of more than 80% of the global population, exactly who Netanyahu is and what constitutes the state that he runs. So what we're seeing, and let's not forget that only last week, upon a visit of Netanyahu to Hungary, the head of state in Hungary actually went as far as to withdraw his country from the ICC in order not to be burdened by the ICC arrest warrant against Netanyahu. What we're seeing is bizarre. What we're seeing is dangerous, and what we're seeing is something that I feel are the very first steps, unless countries like the United States, like the United Kingdom, wake up to exactly where they're heading, what kind of slope they're sliding down. I fear that we are seeing the beginnings of the dismantling of what we used to know as the international law and global world order.
I want to focus on, I think, that very important point that you're making. Hungary's recent announcement that they'll be withdrawing from the ICC. I think, besides underscoring, the growing trend of defiance against international legal mechanisms, what other potential long-term effects of such moves on the integrity of global justice systems will this kind of move have? And are we maybe bound to see more countries grow the route that Hungary has gone?
I fear yes, because we've seen it happen once. There's nothing that says that it'll not happen again. And plus, Hungary never got reprimanded by the international community as it should have done. Unfortunately, the United Nations is whispering rather than actually shouting at its member states, and it's not upholding international law like it should. And therefore, everything says that the sort of Trump edict of how the world should be run, i.e., if you have the cards, as he famously repeated time and time again in his
All right, we seem to have lost Dr. Anas Takriti there. While we try to get him back on air, I think it's very, very important just to look at, these moves by these countries. Hungary obviously being the latest ones who have pulled out of the ICC and saying, well, we don't want to be a part of it. We don't want to be given this burden of arresting Benjamin Netanyahu, who ultimately visited Hungary. And my next question, to the doctor when he comes back would be to obviously try and find out if these organizations, these watchdogs really of humanity at this point, do they still have any kind of credibility, whether it's the ICC, whether it's the ICJ, and all of these bodies like the United Nations, looking at how they've responded to Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu's impunity? Can we still confidently say these are organizations that are in the confidence of humanity, that we know that if there are transgressions against human rights that each and every person living on this planet is entitled to, if they are violated, the violators of those rights are ultimately going to be punished. They're going to be held accountable, and there's going to be repercussions for their actions. And since Benjamin Netanyahu's newfound vigor in this genocide? The answer is unfortunately no. And my concern is where to from here? If we can't run to the ICC, if we can't run to the ICJ, if we can't run to the United Nations, then where do we go? Eh? Ultimately, what's left now? Do people just carry arms and, I don't know, try and, here in South Africa, we call it mob justice when the systems have failed, and we like, the people will take the law into their own hands. Are we ultimately going to move into that direction? Because let's be honest, if it was an African leader, for instance, say it was one of the leaders here on the continent, if they did what Benjamin Netanyahu was doing to a whole people, a whole genocide that is currently being streamed live on all of our screens, we are watching it happen in real time on our phones and our televisions. If it was an African leader, and that warrant of arrest by the ICC was issued, do you think the response would have been the same? Hmm? If it was a if it was a Benjamin Traore, if it was him, or if it was uh, Mnangagwa of Zimbabwe, if it was any leader of one of the states here in the continent, would we have seen this lackluster approach from these various organizations? And I think we've seen previously how they've dealt with African leaders, eh? And I think that gave us some kind of confidence in them, how African leaders and leaders from other parts of the world that are not necessarily in the West, how they've been dealt with when it comes to enforcing those warrant of arrest, charging people with crimes against humanity, charging people with genocides. We've seen it over and over again, but we've never really seen the same approach when it comes to Western leaders, when it comes to people that look and sound a certain way. So yeah, I think it's very, very concerning that we are at this point where it feels like these organizations, these bodies that are put in place and are built up for the protection of human rights, and to make sure that everyone is treated the same, and human rights that every human being is entitled to are not transgressed in any way. They are protected. But it seems when you're black and you're brown in this world, you're not offered the same kind of respect. You're not offered the same kind of protection from bodies like the United Nations, from the ICC and ICJ, and also this concerning trend, from European countries. I think there's almost a disappointment from my end, because there was a point where you felt like there was a wave of change. There was an understanding from the rest of the world that there's a genocide happening in Israel, and Benjamin Netanyahu is responsible for that genocide. He's enforcing it, aided by the United States of America. And if there is a warrant of arrest by the International Criminal Court, then it will be enforced. He will be arrested and he will stand trial and ultimately be held accountable for his actions. But then you have countries like Hungary, you have countries like Italy, you have countries that are literally pulling out of the ICC because of one reason and one reason only, which is not bearing the burden of arresting Benjamin Netanyahu, because we know what that comes with, eh? Here in South Africa, for instance, the ICJ case, and how, for some reason, out of nowhere, we have turned to one of the biggest enemies of the United States of America and our bilateral relations, which, let's be honest, have been okay for a very, very long time. Not perfect, but okay. You know, South Africans always thought the US was one of their biggest allies. We thought we had, a good friend in America. But I think we can all agree at this point that everything that we're seeing, obviously aided by South Africans who are going to America and spewing all kinds of nonsense, saying there's a genocide here and there's a targeting, hogwash. There's nothing like that happening. And I think they just gave America ammunition, something they can hold on to, and stick it to us and say, yeah, you take Israel to court for ICJ, you're implicating us and saying we are aiding in this genocide. Well, we have news for you, buddy. You're not going to get out of this one unscathed. We'll show you who's boss. So yeah, this reminds me of George Orwell's book. That says all animals. There's a quote from his book Animal Farm. Says all animals are equal, but others are more equal than others, and that we're seeing it happen in real time, where it shows that if you're black, if you're brown in this world, if you're not from the West and you don't look a certain way, well, you kind of don't matter. It's been another awesome edition of News and Views. I'll be with you again on Wednesday. We'll be with you again on Thursday because we now have 3 days of News and Views with Salailo Makwidiri. And yeah, really, really excited for this new journey. It's going to be an impactful one. It's going to be an interesting educational one. And thank you so much for being a part of it, and looking forward to awesome eye-opening educational conversations that might not necessarily change the world, but can change how we think and how we approach pressing issues like the genocide happening currently in Gaza, and many other things that are happening here on the continent, and right here in our country, South Africa. We're going to leave it here for now. I'll be with you again tomorrow. Thanks to the team and everyone that was involved in the production of the show. Assalamu alaikum and shap shap.